Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Twitch, YouTube, Tiki and of course, as always, I'm in the reading room on Discord if you want to join there instead. So, yeah, how is everyone? Is everyone doing okay? Is Hump Day treating you well? My apologies for being late today. I had a bit of an accident. For those of you who don't know, because apparently a lot of people don't know what an accident is. Yes, it is when you have an accidental nap. Um, so yeah, welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Okay, so accidents will happen, absolutely. We dive into part 2 of chapter 3 of Orientalism, where we left off last week, where Saïd was talking about the 19th century Orientalism as he has been, but how the peculiar hold that Orientalism, or liberal European culture in general, held such punitive ideas of anything that was other. And certain things were made to seem mysterious, like the mysterious Orient, or inferior, like other languages were deemed inferior. And then, of course, some things were demonized completely, like the indigenous savage idea, or the idea of Islam was demonized. So there were these three kind of tiers of what was done to the other in the view of liberal European cultural study. So, attempting to put everything in boxes, as the colonizer does, when not everything fits in a box, what they did was chop things away from it, reduce it to its absolute base, like without any nuance or any sort of real understanding, or they changed it completely to suit European sensibilities. So where we find ourselves is page 232, and just want to read a little bit of where we stopped 2 weeks ago. All of their studies of classical Islam, Buddhism, or Zoroastrianism, they felt themselves, as George Eliot's Dr. Cosmont confesses, to be acting like the ghosts of an ancient wandering about the world, trying mentally to construct it as it used to be, in spite of ruin and confusing challenges. And that, I think, is where the crux of it lies, really. That what Europe was trying to construct and reconstruct was the ideas that they had of the Orient rather than what it truly is, and trying to make it fit into this box of this is what it's meant to be, really. So let's either cut away or demonize anything else that fits around it. I don't have tea, so I am a little bit grumpy, so bear with me. Can you keep tapping the screen, sharing the live out? Please let Chris know that we are live, because Chris is actually following along with their book. And I don't know where they are. In fact, I haven't spoken to them at all today. Oh, okay. Thank you. So, okay, I'm going to carry on. Despite Chris not being here, um, I would like them to be here, but life happens just like accidents happen. And please remember that I do have the goal of 90. Um, and so, yeah, that goal is every day because I do these things for free. Where these theses about linguistic, civilizational, and finally racial characteristics one side of an academic debate among European scientists and scholars, we might dismiss them as furnishing material for an unimportant closet drama. And that's exactly it. Right. They were furnishing entire histories because they wanted to, A, cover their tracks of their crimes, their colonizational crimes, and B, construct this history of a people that were quote unquote fit to be dominated. The point is, however, that both the terms of the debate and the debate itself had wide circulation. In late 19th century culture, as Lionel Trilling had said, racial theory, stimulated by a rising nationalism and a spreading imperialism, supported an incomplete and malassimilated science that was almost undisputed. Race theory. If you do have a moment, please look up Carl Linnaeus. Linnaeus is considered the father of taxonomy, and his work, he was a botanist. He categorized plants. He was the first person to do categories like this. Like, it was groundbreaking work when it came to plants. But then he decided to do the same thing to humans. And the Institute of Racial Biology was founded at the University of Uppsala in Sweden, where Linnaeus is from. And what Linnaeus did was use pseudoscience to categorize races into different groups, to 5 basic groups. Welcome in, everyone. That's what he did. He categorized races as we know them today based on what he called immutable characteristics, not using phenotypes as it's actually supposed to be done. Well, it's not supposed to be done anyway, but as the only immutable thing is phenotype. But what he actually did was assign intelligence, capabilities, and all of those things to different races, making race theory a thing. And it was all a bunch of bullshit. Carl Linnaeus in Sweden is exalted as Carl von Linné. During the toppling of a lot of statues from 2020 onwards, a lot of white nationalists stood around his statues and protected them. I wonder why. Yes.
Lie down for half an hour.
Okay.
Can you take a moment awake?
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I do need to check if my husband is awake in half an hour, because he has a lot of work to do. Race theory, ideas about primitive origins and primitive classifications, modern decadence and the progress of civilization, the destiny of the white, or what they called Aryan race, or they called it Aryan, the need for colonial territories, all were elements in the particular amalgam of science, politics, and culture, whose drift, almost without exception, was always to raise Europe or European race to domination over non-European portions of mankind. That was the ultimate goal. There was a general agreement that, according to a strangely transformed variety of Darwinism, sanctioned by Darwin himself, the modern Orientals, degraded remnants of former greatness, the ancient or classical civilizations of the Orient, were perceivable through the disorders of present decadence. But only A, because a white specialist with highly refined scientific techniques could do the sifting and reconstructing, and B, because the vocabulary of sweeping generalities, Semites, Aryans, Orientals, referred not to a set of fictions, but to a whole array of seemingly objective and agreed upon distinctions. It's plugging a wall plug into the connector key, the adapter thing, and saying, this is why it works. Because it works. It's like when people argue the Bible, when they use the Bible to prove that the Bible is correct. Darwin audited Darwin and found that Darwin was correct. Racist motherfucker, by the way. Charles Darwin. I want to punch him in the face with knuckle dusters. Thus, a remark about what Orientals were and were not capable of was supported by these biological quote-unquote truths, such as those spelled out in P. Charles Michael's A Biological View of Our Foreign Policy in 1896, Thomas Henry Huxley's The Struggle for Existence in Human Society in 1888, Benjamin Kidd's Social Evolution of 1894, John Crozier's History of Intellectual Development on the Lines of Modern Evolution from 1897 to 1901, and Charles Harvey's The Biology of British Politics from 1904. It was assumed that if languages were as distinct from each other as linguists say they are, then too the language users, minds, cultures, potential, and even bodies were different in similar ways. Oh, I'm British. I should be given a British passport. Because language. I speak better English than most Brits do. These distinctions had the force of ontological, empirical truth behind them, together with the convincing demonstration of such truth in studies of origins, development, character, and destiny. Because everybody can make up shit and then call it truth. Because the university has an agenda. Their funders have an agenda. Unlike me, I don't have agenda. The point to be emphasized is that this truth about the distinctive differences between race, civilizations, and language was, or pretended to be, radical and ineradicable. That's it. So, unable to be eradicated. It went to the bottom of things, asserted that there was no escape from origin, and these types of origins enabled set the real boundaries between human beings on which race, nations, and civilizations were constructed. It forced vision away from common as well as plural human realities like joy, suffering, political organization, forcing attention instead in the downward and backward direction of immutable origins. A scientist could no more escape such origins in his research than an Oriental could escape the Semites or Arabs or Indians from which his present reality, debased, colonized, backward, excluded him, except for the white researcher's didactic presentation. Once these characteristics were fixed in theory, they were fixed in reality. And therefore, white people relied so much, so much on all of these characteristics to define what other people were. This is partly where white people's audacity comes from, by the way, presently, because they're like, oh, we had it right back then. No, y'all didn't even have maths. Y'all didn't even have toilets, honey. We did. In fact, we had bidets. The power to just say, because. And funnily enough, that was the first time I ever heard somebody say, because, as a reason. When a white person said it. The profession of specialized research conferred unique privileges. We recall that Lane could appear to be an Oriental yet retain his scholarly detachment. There was no scholarly detachment. The Orientals he studied became his Orientals, for he saw them not only as actual people, but as monumentalized objects in his account of them. They only existed in his frame of reference. This double perspective encouraged a sort of structured irony. On one hand, there was a collection of people living in the present. On the other, these people, as a subject of study, became the Egyptians, the Muslims, the Orientals. Only the scholar could see and manipulate the discrepancy between the two levels. The people he knew, the good ones, where the idea of the good ones comes from, and the general. Only white people are afforded the luxury of individuality in a world of whiteness. This tendency to the former was always toward greater variety, and yet this variety was always restrained, compressed downward and backward to the radical terminal of generality. Every modern native insistence of behavior became an effusion to be sent back to the original terminal, which was strengthened in the process. So, whenever there was resistance to colonial violence, they would say, look at these people. They're savage. They're barbaric. This kind of dispatching was precisely the discipline of Orientalism. And this is why Orientalism is so important to our current studies and understandings of race, gender, and class. Lane's ability to deal with the Egyptians as present beings and as validations of sui generis labels was a function both of the Orientalist discipline and of generally held views about the Near Orient, Muslim or Semite. In no people more than the Oriental Semites was it possible to see present and origin together. The Jewish people and Muslims, as subject of Orientalist study, were readily understandable in their view of primitive origins and was, to a certain extent still is, the cornerstone of modern Orientalist ideas. Renan had called the Semites an instant of arrested development, and functionally speaking, this came to mean that for the Orientalist, no modern Semite, however much he may have believed himself to be modern, could ever outdistance the organizing claims on him of his origin. And Jewish people have paid for this, century after century, because of European insistence that Jewish people were fundamentally different in terms of humanity. Again and again and again, Jewish people have paid for it. I would argue that Orientalism as a study back then, not Orientalism as Saïd studied it, but Orientalism as a study by Europeans, set the foundation for modern Islamophobia. For modern anti-Jewishness. This functional rule worked on the temporal and spatial levels together. No Semite advanced in time beyond the development of classical periods. No Semite could ever shake loose the pastoral desert environment of tent and tribe. Every manifestation of actual Semitic life could be, and ought to be, referred back to the primitive explanatory category of the Semitic. And mind you, this did not apply. It was the whole attitude then sets the tone for supremacists. Yes. I mean, the supremacist thinking was already there. I mean, they were functioning in the 1800s. Slavery was already a thing. African domination had already started, I mean, from the 1500s. Anti-Semitism toward Jewish people in particular was already a thing. Anti-Islamic behavior was already a thing. This consolidated and solidified it. Not just into writing and theory, but into the minds of people who completely believed that they were superior. It enabled them to look to studies to validate their hatred. I hate it. I hate it so much. The executive power of such a system of reference, by which each discrete instance of real behavior could be reduced down and back to a small number of explanatory original categories, was considerable, and by the end of the 19th century, in Orientalism, it was the equivalent of bureaucracy in public administration. Oh, absolutely. I have so much beef with Western interpretations of Eastern religion. Especially in psychology, yes. They absolutely co-opted mindfulness. They co-opted so much of what we practiced as just Honey Boo Boo, who is listening to this, or you're probably not, who drinks turmeric lattes. It's Hardidud. Indians have been drinking it for centuries. Centuries, literal centuries. Yeah. So don't come here with your turmeric latte. Oh, it's so revolutionary. You want stitches? Thank Indian people for that. Sutures were invented in India. You like zeros at the end of your the figure in your bank account? Thank the Indians for that too. And the Arabs. We invented it. And guess what? Aryan. I'm actually from Aryan people. Like actual Aryan. Yeah. They look like me. The department was always more useful than the individual file, and certainly the human being was significant principally as the occasion for the file. Sounds familiar. We'll get into the narrative in a bit. We must imagine that the Orientalist at work in the role of a clerk, putting together a wide assortment of files in a large cabinet marked Semites, aided by recent discoveries in comparative and primitive anthropology, a scholar like William Robertson Smith could group together the inhabitants of the Near Orient and write on their kinship and marriage customs, the form and content of their religious practices, and then file it under this is Semitic practice. But then they exclude Arabic from Semitic languages because they have an agenda. Because now they want to weaponize anti-Semitism. It gives me a fucking headache. Moss, D&D. Get on it. Anyway, you're cooler than Markiplier. The power of Smith's work is its plainly radical demythologizing of what was known as the Semites. The nominal barriers presented to the world by Islam or Judaism are swept aside. Smith uses Semitic philology, mythology, and Orientalist scholarship to construct a hypothetical picture of the development of social systems, consistent with all Arabian facts. And I love that it's quote unquote. If this picture succeeds in revealing the antecedent and still influential roots of monotheism in totemism or animal worship, and the scholar has been successful. And this, Smith says, despite the fact that our Mohammedan sources draw a veil as far as they can over all the details of old heathenism. Smith's work on the Semites covered areas such as theology, literature, and history, done with a full awareness of work done by Orientalists. See, for instance, Smith's savage attack in 1887 on Renan's The History of the People of Israel, and more important, intended to aid the understanding of the modern Semites. Note, it was 1887. Just say. For Smith, I think, it was a crucial link in the intellectual chain connecting the white man as expert to the modern Orient. None of the encapsulated wisdom delivered as Oriental expertise by Lawrence, Hogarth, Bell, and others would have been possible without Smith. And even Smith, the antiquarian scholar, would not have had half the authority without his additional and direct experience in what he called the Arabian facts. It was the combination in Smith of the grasp of the primitive categories with the ability to see general truths behind empirical vagaries of contemporary Oriental behavior that gave weight to his writing. It was this special combination that adumbrated the style of expertise upon which Lawrence, Bell, and Philby built their reputation. And all of these men's reputation were upheld by each other. Like Burton and Charles Doughty before him, Smith voyaged in the Hejaz between 1880 and 1881. Arabia has been especially privileged for the Orientalists, not only because Muslims treat Islam as Arabia's genius loci, but also because the Hejaz appears historically as barren and retarded as it is geographically. The Arabian desert is thus considered to be a locale about one which can make statements regarding the past in exactly the same form and with the same content that one makes regarding the present. Whew. Spotted the circle jerk. Yes, it is a circle jerk. It absolutely is a circle jerk. And so when he talks about Hijaz in particular, it is the language that is so far removed from historical context. It is grounded in nothing. And this is the kind of thing that gave Zionists the language of them greening the desert. This enabled that kind of ideology to flourish. The only thing flourishing in Israel is hatred. Just by the way. In the Hijaz, you can speak about Muslims, modern Islam, and primitive Islam without bothering to make distinctions. To this vocabulary devoid of historical grounding, Smith was able to bring the cachet of additional authority provided by his Semitic studies. What we hear in his comments is the standpoint of a scholar commanding all the antecedents of Islam, the Arabs, and Arabia as a whole. Hence, he says, it is characteristic of Mohammedanism shoot me now, that all national feeling assumes a religious aspect, inasmuch as the whole polity and social forms of Muslim country are clothed in religious dress. Yeah, they do have dental. But it would be a mistake to suppose that genuine religious feeling is at the bottom of everything that justifies itself by taking a religious shape. The prejudices of the Arab have their roots in conservatism, which lies deeper than his belief in Islam. It is indeed the great fault of the religion of the Prophet that it lends itself so easily to the prejudices of the race among whom it was first promulgated, that it has taken under its protection so many barbarous and obsolete ideas. Even when Muhammad, peace be upon him, so many must have seen to have no religious worth, but which he carried over into the system in order to facilitate the propagation of reformed doctrines. Yet many of the prejudices which seem to us most distinctively Mohammedan have no basis in the Quran. Shoot me now. They all say us because it's us and them. That was a wild passage to read. Like, the fuck? The fuck? I was just like, how? Okay, CapCut, go away. Yeah, CapCut just kind of opens randomly every now and then. It can't go away. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take I'm going to take 5 minutes. Welcome back. So, he even points it out here. The us in the last sentence is this amazing piece of logic. It defines the white man's vantage point explicitly. This allows us to say in the first sentence that all political and social life are clothed in religious dress. Islam can thus be characterized as totalitarian. Then to say that the religion is only a cover to be used by Muslims, in other words, Muslims are hypocrites essentially. And in the third sentence, the claim is made that Islam, even while laying hold upon the Arabs' faith, has not really reformed the Arabs' pre-Islamic conservatism. Nor is this all. For if Islam was successful as a religion, it was because it fecklessly allowed these authentic Arab prejudices to creep in. For such a tactic, now we see that it was a tactic on Islam's behalf, we must blame Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was, after all, a ruthless crypto-Jesuit. But all this is more or less wiped out in the last sentence when Smith reassures the us that everything he said about Islam is invalid, since the quintessential aspect of Islam known to the West are not Mohammedan after all. Marawai. Abelungu. Marawai. I'm only going to read for another just about 2 pages. The principles of identity and non-contradiction clearly do not blind the Orientalist. What overrides them is Orientalist expertise, which is based on irrefutable collectives, verity entirely within the Orientalist philosophical and rhetorical grasp. Smith is able to, without the slightest trepidation, speak about the jejun, practical and constitutionally irreligious habit of the Arabic mind. Ew! It all sounds so gross. Islam as a system of organized hypocrisy and the impossibility of feeling any respect for Muslim devotion, in which formalism and vain repetition are reduced to a system. His attacks on Islam are not relativist, for it is clear to him that Europe's and Christianity's superiority is actual and not imagined. So, hi back, I'm Dad. We have to understand. Thank you. We have to understand. Whenever we have somebody on TikTok panels arguing with us that queerness is wrong and abortion should remain illegal, and one of the things that I heard this past week is that racial segregation is biblical. They are understanding the Bible to be completely and irrefutably true, or their interpretation of it, or their pastor's interpretation of it to be 100% true. They have not read the Bible. Because if they did read their Bible and they still had faith, they would be either deconstructing that faith or completely communist, as Christ himself was. Hello, Lyra. I love him. They completely believe that everybody should subscribe to what they believe as irrefutably true, because it is irrefutable. So they are coming from that mindset. And in that mindset, they find no room for deviation, no room for no wiggle room for anything, really. Any sort of other understanding, like, You can almost see their brains glitching when we tell them not everybody is Christian, not everybody believes in God, and that gender isn't a belief system, but religion is. They glitch. Cat everywhere. Because that is their reality. Their reality is that of what their pastor tells them, instead of questioning what is the possibility outside of it. And this is why I say conservatives have no imagination. Aside from the fact that they saw this most beautiful sight in the middle of nowhere, in this amazing country, and decided to name one of the largest rivers Klip Rivier, Stone River. Have some imagination, guys. At the bottom, Smith's vision of the world is binary, as is evident in such passages as the following. The Arabian traveller is quite different from ourselves. The labour of moving from place to place is a mere nuisance to him. He has no enjoyment in effort as we do, and grumbles at hunger or fatigue with all his might as we do not. You will never persuade the Oriental that when you get off your camel you can have any other wish than immediately to squat on a rug and take your rest, smoking and drinking. Moreover, the Arab is little impressed by scenery, but we are. We are this, they are that. Which Arab, which Islam, when, according to what tests? These appear to be distinctions irrelevant to Smith's scrutiny and experience in the Hijaz. The crucial point is that everything one can know and learn about Semites and Orientals receives immediate corroboration, not merely in the archives, but directly on the ground. The "because I've been there" argument. Yeah, you've been there. Through what lens did you see the world? Why, other Justin? Okay, Justin, you have to stand up for. You have to stand up for the rights of the Justins. Let me go and wake up my husband. Look at the memes channel. I really don't have time. Something algorithm. So, Smith. There are some names that are really interesting. I don't hate the name Smith because it's common. I hate the name Smith because it's boring. Out of such a coercive framework by which a modern coloured man is chained irrevocably to general truths formulated about his prototypical linguistic, anthropological, and doctrinal forebears by white European scholars, the work of the great 20th century Oriental experts in England and France derived. To this framework, these experts also brought their private mythology and obsessions, which in writers like Doughty and Lawrence have been studied with considerable energy. It's painful. It's painful trying to understand the mindset of somebody so hell-bent on domination. Each, Wilfred, Scawen Blunt, Doughty, Lawrence, Bell, Hogarth, Philby, Sykes, Straws, believed his visions of things Oriental was individual, self-created out of some intensely personal encounter with the Orient, Islam, or Arabs. Each expressed general contempt for official knowledge held in the East. The sun made me an Arab, Doughty wrote in Arabia Deserta, but never warped me into Orientalism. Yet in the final analysis, all except Blunt expressed traditional Western hostility to and fear of the Orient. Their views defined and gave a personal twist to the academic style of modern Orientalism, with his repertoire of grand generalizations, tenditious science from which there was no appeal, reductive formulae. Doughty again, on the same page as his sneer at Orientalism, quotes, "The Semites are like to a man sitting in a cloaca to the eyes, and whose brows touch heaven." This is why we say we have ancestors. Europeans have forefathers. They acted, promised, recommended public policy on the basis of these generalizations, and by a remarkable irony, they acquired the identity of white Orientals in their natal cultures, even as, in the instances of Doughty, Lawrence, Hogarth, and Bell, their professional involvement with the East, like Smith's, did not prevent them from despising it thoroughly. The main issue for them was preserving the Orient and Islam under the control of the white man. And there I will stop for today. Any questions or comments? Alrighty, I'm going to say goodbye to you on, I'm going to close Discord, say goodbye to you on TikTok and, no, not TikTok, on Twitch and YouTube over here. I shall see you tomorrow for this reading, Abolition Feminism Now. But yeah, if you want to donate to me, please do so through the links in my link tree. Follow me on all the socials, all of the good things. I'm on Twitch, YouTube, TikTok. And of course, if you are a leftist and you have a sense of humor and you are slightly horny, you can join our Discord server. And yeah, I shall see y'all tomorrow.